will use other times, we want to not make more of this, okay? We want to just use what we need. You're going to have a flux brush here. There's a pair of pliers that you might use. Please only ever use these. Don't get the jewelry pliers mixed up because you can see what this does to them. There's a sponge and it should be wet, and then there's also a scrub pad. And your surface should look like this. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do to set up your piece, in this drawer, you're going to find tacks, and you're going to find 2 L shapes. And the first thing, if I can't impress anything at the beginning, it's that you really, let me get that over for me. You want to make sure that your piece, the outside edge, is square. With this piece, it's small, so there's not much to move around, but when you get to your bigger panel, if you have any irregularities, I was just talking to Paige, she was asking me if she should do some more grinding. The solder will fill in some gaps, so depending on your piece, no, you might not need to do any more grinding, but if you make sure that your outside is perfectly square, we can move around and kind of fudge around on the inside, and you won't notice it at the end, okay? It's a paint? Ah, good, you got it. All right, so I'm gonna plug in my soldering iron, and then I'm going to, while that's heating up, then I'm going to get that set up. And you're not gonna work here. I'm just working here so that hopefully you can see. All right, so I like to have this in front of me this way, but for now I'll just move it to the side until I get this set up. All right, so here's my pattern, my design. You want to make sure the outside is square, but also maybe move some of your pieces. So like, maybe that's a better square edge. That has a little bit of a curve to it. If I move that inside, it won't be noticeable, but that edge will be straight. So the way these work is the best way you can. Have the biggest space here. Okay, that makes that square. So I'm going to slide that out. Over here. And I fudged it a little bit, but to the eye it's pretty rectangular. But what I see students want to do is they want their piece to fit together, so they go and they move everything in tight against each other no matter what the outside looks like. The outside that matters. Okay, and then just to help you, you're going to stick these tacks, hold your piece, and just tack it gently, just enough that it goes in the wood, and it will hold it in place while you solder, the first step of soldering. There are a couple different steps to soldering. The first one is also called tack. So I don't want you to get confused with these tacks and tack soldering. So you're going to tack your piece into place, and then you're going to tack solder, which temporarily keeps your piece together. Just like that. Okay? Any questions so far? All right. What you need? Linoleum block. Yeah, I got them over in my drawer. Okay. Okay. All right. So first thing I'm going to do, while that's still heating up, I'm going to put flux on my interior corners. So I'm going to hold my pieces and I'm just going to brush a little bit of flux. Now we don't wear gloves back here. Okay. But what can be irritating to your hands? Some days it is, some days it's not for me. But the flux can be a little bit irritating to your hands. The only thing it'll do is you might feel it. If you have a cut, it might get in it and it'll sting a little bit. Some days I'll get like a little irritation, it itches. Okay, so if you feel that, just go wash your hands with soap. But that's all it does. But some days it bothers me and some days it doesn't, so I can't say it will for you or not. But the flux, you just want to put a little bit on, and that's going to keep the metal clean. So I have this plugged in, and I don't feel the heat yet. Go over here. Might have to switch back here. Let's see. But I'll demonstrate with this one while that's heating up. The way to hold a soldering iron. Have any of you soldered before? You have. You were talking about in electronics, right? Okay. I think we hold them differently. Do you hold them more like a pencil?
Yeah.
You hold them like a pencil. Okay, you're going to want to hold it like a pencil. The way to hold it is more like you're riding a bike, which will feel awkward at first, but then it'll make total sense why you hold it like this. Because you feed the solder from the top and it comes down the bottom. It's a little bit different because you have this chisel tip. Okay? So you're going to have a piece of solder about like that. You're going to hold it, and when you hold your soldering iron, you're holding it more like this, which is different than this. This won't work.
We normally hold it basically like that. We hold it at an equal, holding like.
But still like a pencil?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, when you soldered, you're doing more point soldering, right? Like a little dot.
Give or take, yeah.
We're going to be running with it. So this makes it a lot easier. So you feed from the top, it's going to heat through and go to the bottom. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to heat and I'm going to tack my intersections. And really, the only two I have are here and here. And that's actually going to hold my whole piece together. Enough for me to take my outside tacks out. Okay. There we go. Now it's hot. I'm going to have to move this over. Bundles, because the main thing that you have to keep very, very careful about are the cords. If the cord gets in the coil near the soldering iron, you can have a huge electrical fire. It's happened one time. So you need to be very aware of the cords. And I point that out because art students, we get very creative and then we forget about safety. And this room is much more like a shop than any other classroom. Okay, so this tells me it's getting hot. It'll still get hotter. These are 100 watts. You're used to some 25 watt or 35 down there. So this is the real deal. You will burn yourself if you touch it, so don't touch any part of this. Yeah, it is very, very hot. So to keep your tip clean, this one doesn't look real good at the moment. The steam is going to drive excess solder off. This pad you can take out and run over, and that already shined that up. Needs to be clean or else the solder won't flow. You can also, you might want to just step back while I do this, but dip just the tip into the flux and that will keep that tip clean as well. Clean, everything should just be clean and then it'll flow really nicely. All right, so I think I'm ready to start. So I fluxed my corners and now I'm going to tack. So I'm going to hold it overhand. I'm going to feed from the top and let it fall. Now I am touching a little bit just to make sure that I'm hitting those corners. This does not need to look good. So don't worry about smoothing it down. This is just to hold your piece so you can get these tacks out of the way. So I'm going to tack here at my corner. I'm going to tack here. And I'm done. A bigger panel, you're going to have a lot more tacking. You just start in the middle and work your way out. You do not need to tack out here at your outside edges. That'll just create a mess. So now I'm going to take these out and put them away. I'm done with them. Now I'm going to run a bead of solder. So it's tack and then bead. So I'm going to take my flux again and I'm going to brush it over. And you probably only need to dip that flux brush one time. I'm going to do all of my seams. See, I can move it. And we always want to go across our body, like right to left or left to right. This way and this way gets awkward. So you're just always kind of moving across. And you won't have it like this, but as you can imagine why I have it positioned there. So I have it perpendicular to my seam, and I have it over the seam. I'm not using, you use the point. We don't use the point of the soldering tip. We kind of lay it as close to flat as we can. And I'm going to heat and feed and hover and pull a bead. And when I get to the end, I'm going to pull off towards me. Okay, if you want to step in and look, this is what the seam, this is what you're aiming for. This is what you're aiming for. Do you see how it's rounded? That's why I got termed running a bead, because it's beaded. You don't want it flat. If it's flat, probably you're holding the soldering iron this way. And there is a time to hold your soldering iron this way, and I'll explain in a minute. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run a bead. Now I can pull this solder here out. Look how far that goes. But now I'll feed it so I get everything the same width. I come off. And I'm going to turn this. Let it dry, because it'll jiggle for a little bit. So let it dry. And I'll show you the difference between here and here. Feed, sounds goofy, feed what you need. Just feed as much as needed. And that'll take some practice, and that's what these pieces are all about. I want them to look good, but try to learn what needs to be done here. So solder can fill that gap. That's about as big as gap as we want, though. And you definitely don't want that gap at the end. So that's why I did this real quick last period. I didn't have time to really fuss with it. So I was like, that'll be good for demonstration. So what I would do here is I'm going to coat, first of all, both sides. I'm not going to worry about it. It is getting in there a little bit, but I'm going to coat both sides. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to feed, but pull kind of towards me. I'm kind of dabbing at it. And look how I'm filling that. I don't have any jewelry students this semester. My jewelry students would be like kind of amazed and disgusted at the same time, because jewelry soldering, Cassie knows, solder does not fill gaps in jewelry. So that's the benefit of soldering in glass. Now I'm just going to go back and make sure that looks nice and round. So you can go back and just kind of dab at it, and look how that fixes it. You can do this because lead melts at a low temperature. Now, yes, that seam looks different from that, but it's beginner. It's fine. It's fine. It's going to be fine. So I'm going to turn it. I'm going to do here. And then I can just kind of go back and even it up. Always pull off towards you rather than straight up and down. You can actually catch your foil and kind of do damage to your piece. Okay, so now I've run my bead on the front. The next type of soldering is going to be tinning. We need to cover all the copper. So I'm going to flux here. And for this, if you could please use some of this solder, it would be much appreciated, because this is just as good. Excuse me, I'm sizzling. So we can pick up off of this. It might take a minute to melt it, but this is kind of fun. So you can really get a sense for what, solder does. And you'll get all these little beads, but we have to clean these up because we can't have loose solder around. So you can pick it up flat and put it on sideways. Isn't that cool? Yeah, it is cool. This reminds me of Mercury. I don't know if you guys see. Do you see Mercury anymore? I don't know if they get that out for you guys because it's so dangerous. Okay, and if you put just the right amount on, you're going to bead that up too. So you can kind of touch it and get that same appearance. Now I have a gap there at the end. I am not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to get all my coating on, I will take care of that at the very, very end. Okay, see how I kind of mushed it through there? It stays in the liquid form for a little bit. So flat, I can pull that away from my piece. Flat takes it off, holding your iron flat, and then perpendicular will put it on. So every now and then I'm cleaning off my excess solder. This should live here. Yeah, yep.
Paige, you want to take it from here?
Okay. So, tack, bead, tin. Now I'm going to turn it over to the back. I'm going to flux. And what do you think I do on the back? Which soldering step do I go to? Or what don't I need to do on the back? I don't need to tack because it's together. So, I am going to go ahead and run my beads. Notice I left that on, that'll come off. We're gonna wash this, and so you don't have to get that off if you have it. I might let it cool a little bit from front to back. And if a seam, that one ran a little bit. So I'm gonna let that cool and then I'll go back and fix it up. But if you can't work a seam too long because the solder melts at such a low temperature, it just starts to become a mess. I'm not gonna go back there. It flattened out a little bit, so I'm just gonna leave it go. So I feed from the top and just pull. And you'll see it behind your soldering iron, depending on which way you pull it, right to left or left to right. And so watch that. It's telling you how much it needs. There was a little air bubble, so I just dabbed it and covered it right up. Now I am experimenting with you guys. Usually I have people take notes. I'm not having you take notes. Don't make sparks over there. What if that acetylene torch was leaking and you didn't know? You've got a lot of students right there. Okay, so now what do I do? I just ran my beads. What else is covered? Or what else do I need to cover? Yep, and do you remember what that's called? When you're just going to coat. Tinning. Okay, even though you're not taking notes, you will have to know this. Okay, so tinning is just coating. So I'm going to pick up this solder again. All these little solder balls I'm going to work off of. It's actually a lot easier to do it this way than try to do it with that. So again, flat, picks up, and just coat it. And you should go that quickly. If you hold it on the copper foil, you can burn the foil, and that's not great. Okay, so now, remember I said I have this gap here? We're going to be able to fix that from this side because we also need to tin the outside edges. So for here, you can figure out, it's hot. Okay? Glass is a poor conductor of heat, but it still does conduct heat. So this is pretty warm to touch. You could use these pliers, that's why they're there. Sometimes you're going to be working this direction. Sometimes I'll prop it against the caddy. So whatever you choose to do, I can prop it against this, which I think I'll do that. I'll probably need both hands. So I'm going to use flux because that keeps it clean. And I just dripped a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to show you how to fix that. So if I have that, I'm going to tin the two edges coming at it. And now I can fill that. For this one, I might need to move it over here. And I just let it drip into that opening and covers it right up. See how that covered it right up? And then I can come back to the front and just touch. We want it to look smooth. When I brought some over, you see how those two solder balls attach themselves? They drip down the front. You can fix it easy. Flat takes it off. Actually, that just corrected it. Okay, again, this will take any excess solder off. Got a little bit there I can correct. Flat takes this off. Again, get your extra solder in here, not on the work surface. Okay, I'm going to finish out my sides, and then I'm going to solder jump rings on. I know this is a lot. I know this is a lot, and this is such a new technique. I will be around to help. Please don't be offended if I correct a technique, because it's a technique. It's not Mrs. Edwards. Don't take it personally. You have to trust me. You gotta trust me. I know what I'm doing, and I want your piece to be good. I don't want it to be terrible. And I'm not gonna let you back here doing something that's only frustrating you. I mean, why would I do that? If you are frustrated, ask for help. Watch a classmate who did it. Ask them. Take a break. Do it tomorrow. Do it the next class. Especially with craft like this, you have to be in a good, if it's not working, sometimes it's just the day. Just don't be lazy, but sometimes it's just the difference of a day. All right, so I've got I'm just gonna double check. It's all coated. Look what I did. Solder will only stick where there's copper. It will not stick to glass. So you could let that cool and actually just flick it off. It'll come off. See how it just comes right off? But it's stuck there at the solder seam. So flat takes it off. Here it goes. You can run it on the glass. It'll pick it right up. Okay, and then I'll just touch this and fix that up. So then go back and check it front to back. Make sure that your seams look really nice and smooth. And then the last thing we're going to do is put 2 jump rings on it. Jump rings are in here. And we want this to be able to function. So these can be, stained glass often hangs in a window. So this is tricky, and I want you to try it. Try to find 2 that match. Now, jump rings need to be closed, so take one of these pliers, your other hand, and just close it so that they meet. And it doesn't matter to me if it hangs portrait or landscape. It's up to you, it's your piece. And this can be tricky, and I will help after I've seen that you have suffered enough and tried it. Okay. I think this will be up. So I'm gonna put it in my corners. I'm gonna hold it like that, and I have the seam down. It's hard to see. And I'm gonna be soldering it right to that edge. So I'm going to dip that in the flux so that that's clean. I'm going to use one of these solder pieces that are on my workstation. I'm going to coat this. I'm going to take a little bit of solder. Okay, I'm holding it flat carefully. I'm just going to put a little bit there. Clean that off. I let it cool for a second. Just gonna pick up a tiny amount, and then I'm gonna go in and touch both together. And I'm kind of trying to touch on the inside of that jump ring, and it'll sit right down, and I'm gonna hold it while it cools. You want to see that that solder has kind of gone up and over the seam of the jump ring. Okay, so I just coat that seam with solder, pick up flat, touch it a little bit. I dripped, I can clean that up. And then I'm going to go in, touch both. You do have to have a steady hand. And hold it while it cools. And then they should be on. Okay? And then you can double check it. It looks like, see how on the back, see the difference from the front to the back? See how it's coated? And then you can kind of see? So I would touch back there with some solder. But you have to hold on with the pliers or else it falls. So they can be tricky, but you can do it. So this again you can flick off later, this you can flick off later, or use your soldering iron. Okay, it's warm, it's greasy, it's grimy. You need to wash it. But I would just let it cool for a couple of minutes. I'm not going to because of time. Oh, well, I'll clean this up and then I'm going to wash it at the sink. But you need to wash it at the sink to get all that flux off. If the flux stays on it, it's going to damage the finish of this solder. Okay, I'm just going to give it one dip before I clean up. Now, when I clean up my surface, I'm going to take this, put it back up here somewhere. That's good. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to melt all these little solder balls that you really want to try to avoid from making back into one puddle. Don't touch that puddle. Just let it cool. This is going to go back here. We're going to unplug. That goes there. This goes here. And this is bundled a little bit tighter. I'll redo that. Then we're going to brush off your surface and any scraps go in here, not in the trash can. All right, so you'll take this off and any lead that you didn't pick up goes in here. But please take time to put it back into a puddle because we can continue to reuse that. And this is not cheap stuff. Okay? All right, so then it looks like this. It's shut down. I'm gonna wash this right at the sink. Right under the water. A little bit of soap. There's a toothbrush. And you wanna scrub at your seams. I missed one piece of copper. There's some copper. I'll have to go back and get that. And then there's a towel here. And I'm going to make sure that my hands are clean. That's just dish soap. There's ivory soap there too, but I know some people have allergies with ivory. And then the last step will be to patina it, but I'm not going to do that today because I will lose you. You will snooze away. Okay? And then you just store it in your box until we're ready to patina it. From here to here, you can put anything you want, but I have fishing line that you can put so it can hang. But we will patina this a nice dark patina. All right? I know it's a lot.